Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, or whatever daytime you're having at the moment. Hello, Yaba. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Takeaway English class, where English is learned through logic. Because grammar becomes much easier when we understand the logic behind it. And if you are just joining us, hi there. I hope our classes will help you improve your English and support you on your learning journey. Right now, we are learning relative clauses. One of the topics that students often find confusing. But don't worry, step by step, we are going to break everything down. Make it simple, practice together, and understand the logic behind it all. Okay? So, during our previous live lessons, we learned defining relative clauses, right? Defining relative clauses. What are they? What are defining relative clauses? Defining relative clauses give essential information about someone or about something. We use them to identify exactly who or what we are talking about. This information is necessary. Without it, the listener may not understand who or what we are talking about, or who or what we mean. And the sentence feels incomplete without defining relative clauses, right? We also know that in defining relative clauses, we do not use commas, right? Because the whole sentence works together and every clause matters. We learned how relative words work and are used in defining relative clauses. Okay? Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, Yuza. Good morning, Amal. How are you guys? Okay. So, Telegram and YouTube, if you want to join us. Okay, so defining relative clause. What does it mean? For example, of course, people who were attending all my previous live lessons, you already know how we use defining relative clauses and when we use them, right? So this is a defining relative clause when we provide essential information, when we want to identify someone or something. And defining relative clause works like a passport, right? You cannot go to the airport without having a passport, right? My cat has a passport. Even my fridge has a passport, right? We need passports to identify ourselves. That is a defining relative clause. For example, the guy who is wearing, for example, number 5 shirt, defining relative clause, is my best friend. Is my best friend. Here, who is wearing number 5 shirt? This is a defining relative clause. This sentence helps us identify who we are talking about. For example, imagine you are watching a football game with your friend, and you tell your friend, the guy is my best friend. Your friends won't understand which guy you mean, right? If you only say the guy is my best friend. But if you provide this essential information, then the listener understands who are you talking about, which guy you mean, right? With number 5 shirt. This is essential information that helps us identify someone or something, like a passport. Okay? We learned all the relative words that are used with defining relative clauses, right? Such as who, which, that, whom, who, which, that, whose, where, when, why. They are all relative words, right? Now, today we are going to talk about non-defining relative clause. If you are a first-time listener, if you didn't join our live lessons when we talked about defining relative clauses, I've explained everything from the beginning, from the basics, how we use defining relative clauses, how we use relative words. We talked about the structures. We talked about the rules. If you are a first-time listener, you can go to my YouTube channel where you can find all our previous live lessons, recorded live lessons on my YouTube. When it comes to the Telegram, there I share some phrasal verbs, idioms, some grammar tips, exercises from the books where you can practice regularly. You can always ask me questions, provide your own sentences, and chat with other English learners, okay? So if you want to join our Telegram community, you can find my Telegram channel in my TikTok profile, or you can just send me a direct message on TikTok and I'll send you my Telegram channel. Okay? And when it comes to the books, you can find everything in my profile, in my TikTok profile. If you cannot understand something, you can always send me a direct message on TikTok. User, could you please send me a direct message on TikTok so I remember you, and after the live lesson is finished, I can send you the Telegram channel personally, okay? What about private lessons? When it comes to the private lessons, I'm going to create group lessons. There will be only 8 people, 8, starting from the 20th of June, okay? So if you will join our Telegram community, I'll send you all the information about my private group lessons, my YouTube lessons, my YouTube videos, exercises, etc. Okay? All right. So, non-defining relative clause. What is it? Defining essential information, non-defining additional information, okay? Non-defining relative clauses work differently. Here, the information is not essential. It is just extra information or just optional. In these sentences, the listener already knows who or what you are talking about. It is up to you if you want to add extra details or not. For example, my husband who is a doctor is 40 years old. Here, if you remove the non-defining, the listener still understands who my husband is, right? It's just extra information. Maybe I just want to add extra information, or maybe I just want to show off a little, okay? So if I simply say my husband is 40, the sentence still makes sense, okay? If I remove where is it? If I remove my husband is 40, the sentence still makes sense. My husband is 40. The sentence is complete. The listener knows who your husband is, okay? Your husband is identified. Well, unless you have 5 husbands, if you have 5, then of course you need extra information to identify which one of them is 40, right? But when you have 1 husband, you can just say, my husband is 40. We don't need essential information to identify who you are talking about or which husband you mean, right? So it's optional. It's up to you. You can add extra information and say, my husband, who is a doctor, is 40, but it's optional. It's extra information. Another example. Donald Trump who is the president of the US is 70, or I don't know, how old is he? 70, 75, I don't know. Is 75 years old, okay? If I remove the middle part of the sentence, can you still understand who I mean? If I remove this part of the sentence, can you still understand who I mean? Donald Trump is 75 years old. Yes, right. Thank you, Unicorn, Alice. Thank you. Exactly. We still understand who I mean, right? Donald Trump is 75 or whatever years old, right? This is a non-defining relative clause. And as you can see, we always need commas here, okay? Because this information is extra, therefore we need commas, okay? Another example. So again, Donald Trump is 75 years old. We remove this sentence, this extra information, but the sentence still makes sense. However, of course, we can add this information. It's optional, but still, if you want to add this extra information, you can do that, but make sure you add commas, okay? Now, what happens if we want to use non-defining relative clause, but we skip commas, like with my husband or with my boyfriend, for example? My boyfriend who lives in Spain, is 30. If we use non-defining relative clause and we skip the commas, the listener will think that you have more than one boyfriend, okay? maybe 3 of them or 4 of them. And you just want to identify which one you are talking about. Okay? If you skip commas. Because grammar rule tells us when we skip the commas, one in every country. Great. Okay, so my boyfriend who lives in Spain is 30. The other one that lives in Italy is 25. Another one that lives in the US is 45. Okay? So grammar tells us that when we skip commas, it means we use defining relative clause. And we want to identify which one of them lives in Spain. Okay? We want to identify which one. That's a defining relative clause. Okay? Because defining relative clause works like a whole sentence. Every clause matters, whereas non-defining is just extra information, okay? It's just extra information. That's why we use commas, because even without this clause, well, in speaking, of course, it's difficult to understand. However, there is tiny pause when we use commas. My boyfriend, who lives in Spain, is 30. A tiny pause with commas, but it's still difficult to understand, especially when people talk very fast, right? Another one. We will talk about it later, how you can understand when there is a non-defining relative clause or defining relative clause, because there are some rules that we should follow. Because non-defining relative clauses don't work exactly the same as defining relative clauses. There are some rules different from the defining relative clauses, okay? And of course, we are going to talk about them later. Now, I just want you to have an idea what is the difference between them, okay? Another example. Michael Phelps, who won 28 Olympic medals, is the greatest swimmer. Now, some of you who are not into swimming may not know who Michael Phelps is. But grammar doesn't care whether you know him or not. This is a grammar rule. When we start the sentence with a famous person's name, We usually do not need essential information to identify them, okay? Unless you know 5 Michael Phelps, there are 5 of them, and you want to identify which one, okay? But still, he is a famous swimmer. And grammar doesn't care about if you know him or not. It's a grammar rule, okay? And of course, here we can add extra information saying that he won 28 Olympic medals. Of course, he is the greatest swimmer. So Michael Phelps, by the way, he won 28 Olympic medals, extra information, optional, is the greatest swimmer. Even without this information, the sentence still makes sense. Michael Phelps is the greatest swimmer. Okay? So every time you think whether it's a defining relative clause or non-defining relative clause, you can just skip this information and ask yourself, does the sentence make sense? If yes, so it's a non-defining relative clause. You just add extra information, by the way, okay? Another example. Now, I want you to tell me, do I need commas or not, okay? Yeah, Muhammad Ali who was one of the fastest boxers ever. Was a friend of Mike Tyson. What do you think? Do we need commas here, or we should identify which Muhammad Ali we mean, or who we are talking about? What do you think? So we need essential information to identify who is Muhammad Ali. Yes, we can identify him. Thank you, Mel. Of course we can. Especially if you are into boxing, right? He was the best boxer, fastest boxer. But however, even if you don't know who Muhammad Ali is, the grammar doesn't care about it. It's a grammar rule because he's a famous person. He doesn't need essential information to be identified. Okay? So we need commas. We usually use commas like this. Muhammad Ali, comma. Okay, I'm gonna use blue. Muhammad Ali, comma. Then we provide extra information, optional or extra, optional or extra. And then we use comma again. And the final sentence that Muhammad Ali was a friend of Mike Tyson, So even Muhammad Ali was a friend of Mike Tyson. This sentence is complete without this optional or extra information. Yes, in case someone doesn't need to be identified, we use commas, okay? Or if we know my husband, if I only have my husband, only one husband, I don't need essential information, right? My husband, who lives in Spain, is 40. Since I have only one husband, if I have 5 or 6 husbands, then I don't need commas. I need essential information to identify which one lives in Spain, which one is 40. If I have 5 husbands, then I have essential information to make the listener understand which one of them is 40, which one of them lives in Spain. And when we provide essential information, we don't need commas because the whole sentence matters, okay? The whole sentence works together. Okay? Another example. Lionel Messi. When I start this sentence with this name, you can already understand that does this person need essential information to be identified? Alice, exactly. It was non-defining clause because we just provide extra information. When we use extra information, we use commas. When we need essential information to identify the person or thing, and without this essential information, the listener won't understand who we are talking about. We need essential information and we don't need commas, okay? Like here, when I start the sentence with this name, does anyone needs essential information to identify this person? Is there anyone in this world who doesn't know who Lionel Messi is? Right? So when we start the sentence with Lionel Messi, we need comma. Of course we need a comma because we already understand that then we are going to provide extra information, optional. We don't need essential information, okay? It doesn't work like a passport. We don't need a passport to understand who Lionel Messi is. We just need extra information. That's why I want you to think of defining relative clause like a passport, whereas non-defining relative clause like a driving license or a visa or I don't know, extra documents, right? Even if you have these documents, without a passport, you cannot be identified, right? You need these documents after you are identified. So Lionel Messi is already identified, right? So we can provide extra information, but it's optional. But when we don't know the person or thing, first of all, we need essential information. That's how defining and non-defining relative clauses work. So again, when you start the sentence with Lionel Messi, here we only need extra information. For example, Lionel Messi, who is known, for example, for his dribbling, comma, dribbling skills, let's use comma here, has broken many football records. Okay? Exactly, unicorn. You just add more details, but it's still optional. If you don't want to add more details, you can't skip them. The sentence still makes sense. For example, again, Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi. And the listener understands right away who Lionel Messi is, right? Lionel Messi, who is known for his dribbling skills, extra information, you can skip it, has broken many football records. Right? If I skip this information, the sentence still makes sense. The listener knows perfectly who Lionel Messi is, right? That's a non-defining relative clause. Okay? Okay, now let's see if there is something I wanted to tell you. There is non-defining. Yeah. Do you guys remember the example about the phone? Like here, when we when we learned defining relative clause, yeah, here. So if we start the sentence, the phone is a new model. Imagine you are at the shop. There are lots of phones. And you tell your friend, the phone is a new model. Your friend cannot understand which phone you are talking about, right? There are lots of phones. And here we need essential information, defining relative clause without commas, right? Essential information. The phone that costs 1,500 is a new model. Now the listener understands which phone you are talking about. Here we use defining relative clause without commas. So the listener understands which phone we are talking about. We need information to identify the phone. Now let's look at the non-defining relative clauses. The iPhone 15 is a new model. Do we need essential information here to make the listener understand which phone we are talking about? No, right? Thank you, Les. We don't need essential information. The phone is identified. We start the sentence with the iPhone 15, right? The phone is already identified. Here, of course, you can add more details or extra information, but it's optional. It's up to you. And then if you add extra information here, then you should use commas. We usually use commas, the phone, comma, the iPhone 15, here, comma. Here you can add extra information, and after that extra information, comma, and is a new model. Okay? However, guys, if you don't understand something, no worries. During this week and by the next week, we are going to practice non-defining relative clauses. You can always rewatch this live lesson on YouTube that I'm going to upload today. And of course, you can join our community on Telegram where I share exercises from the book, some grammar tips, dialogues, phrasal verbs, idioms, where you can practice regularly, where you can ask me questions, and of course, chat with other English learners. All you need to do is just go to my TikTok profile. And if you cannot find it, you can always send me a direct message on TikTok, and I'll send you my channels, my Telegram channel, my YouTube channel. When it comes to the books or materials I'm using during my live lessons, you can find in my profile, in my TikTok profile, okay? Exactly, the phone, the iPhone 15, which I bought yesterday, is a new model. Perfect. Thank you for your example. Now you can see that which I bought yesterday. The listener still understands the iPhone 15, right? The iPhone 15 is a new model. The sentence still makes sense, right? Even without which I bought yesterday, it's still new model, right? Okay. The iPhone 15, which costs 1,500, is a new model. Yes, maybe for someone it's this information is essential, but not for the grammar, okay? The grammar rules tell us that if you have the iPhone 15 here, then this information becomes extra information, okay? Because even without this information, the sentence is complete. The iPhone 15 is a new model, okay? What else I wanted to tell you about non-definings? Let's see. So, yeah, a non-defining relative clause gives extra information. It is like a driving license or a resume. While these documents are useful, you don't need them to identify a person or thing. The person or the thing is already known. Okay? My mother, who is 55 years old, is a great cook. My mother already tells us that the person is identified. Okay? Even if we skip this information, the sentence still makes sense. My mother is a great cook. Unless you have five of them, we usually have one mother, like, right? Another example, Paris, which is the capital of France, is very romantic. If I remove this sentence, which is the capital of France, can you understand which city or which city I'm talking about? Of course you can. This is extra information, optional. Okay? So think of it like this. If we remove this part, who plays for Inter Miami, like from this sentence, do we still understand who we mean? If the answer is yes, it's a non-defining relative clause. Okay? And therefore, we need commas. Okay? Well, when it comes to the relative words, like we learned whom, who, which, whose, etc., non-defining relative clause works differently. Well, with whom, who, which, we use them exactly the same as we do with defining relative clauses. But there are some rules that we should know, and we are going to talk about them tomorrow. Now, what else I wanted to say? Yeah. When it comes to the king, I always tell you that I call the relative word that the king of the defining relative clauses, the king of the relative clauses. Why? Because we can use that we can replace almost all the relative words with that. We can replace who, whom, which, where, when, why, right? Exception is whose, right? When we cannot replace whose with that. That's why I like to call the relative word that the king of defining relative clauses. Okay? Now, when it comes to the non-defining relative clauses, we don't have the king there. Okay? So, non-defining. Here we have the king, it's a monarchy. Let's say it's a monarchy. We have that. Non-defining doesn't have the king. It's a republic, okay? It becomes republic. Why? Because it doesn't have the king. We cannot replace relative words with that in non-defining relative clauses. We can only use who and whom for people, which for things, whose when we talk about possession, right? Where, when describing places or time. When we need these words, we use these words. Know that. Know that. We don't have the king. Okay? Here we have the king that, and we should follow the rules, right? This information is always essential, and we follow the rules. Here, it's optional. People decide whether they use information or not. So it's a republic. Whereas here, we should follow the rules. We always need information, and we should always provide that information. Okay? So, the main rules when it comes to the defining and non-defining clauses is that with defining we have that, the king. With non-defining we don't have that, and we always need commas. Okay? Okay, let's say you are watching football again. There are lots of players. 10, let's say 9 or 8 or 7, and you are watching football from outside with your friends, and you tell your friends, for example, Lionel Messi Messi. Who is wearing the number 10? The number 10 shirt is warming up. Non-defining. Because we start the sentence with Lionel Messi. Non-defining. Okay? Another example. You are still watching football. There are lots of players. You are watching from outside. Here you have 7, 8, 9, 5, 3, for example, okay? And you tell your friend, the guy who is wearing the number 8 shirt is my friend. Is warming up. Now, I'm gonna remove this defining relative clause here and here. Here, you tell your friend, Lionel Messi is warming up. Is the sentence correct? Complete? Can your friend understand who are you talking about? They all have numbers, right? Yes. Thank you, Les. You can understand. Lionel Messi is warming up. And of course, if you need to add more details here, you can put them in the middle, but with commas, okay? What about this one? The guy is warming up. There are lots of guys with different numbers. The guy is warming up. Can your friend understand which guy you are talking about? The guy is warming up. Yeah, because there are lots of guys playing football. And here you are standing with your friend saying, the guy is warming up. Which one? This one or maybe this one? Imagine they are all warming up. And you just say, the guy is warming up. Which one? We need essential information to make the listener understand which guy we mean. The sentence is incomplete. But if I tell my friend, the listener, the guy who is wearing the number 8 shirt is warming up. Now the listener understands that I'm talking with the number 8. This information is essential. This is a defining relative clause. And here we don't need commas because this sentence, the whole sentence, work together like a team. Each clause matters, okay, to make the sentence complete and make the listener understand which guy we mean, which guy we are talking about. Okay, and that's the difference between non-defining and defining relative clauses, okay? Today, I just wanted to give you an idea how defining relative clauses work and how non-defining relative clauses work. Okay? Because from tomorrow, we are going to learn relative words that are used with non-defining relative clauses, and we should learn some rules. Okay? Now, quick tests. I'm going to provide some sentences and I want you to tell me whether we need commas or not. Okay? The students who arrived late missed the beginning of the lesson. Tomorrow, at 10:30 a.m. of course. What do you think? Do I need commas here? Thank you, Unicorn. We don't need commas here, right? Because here there are lots of students, but only the students who arrived late missed at the beginning of the lesson. Not all of them. I'm sorry, the students. Not all of them. Only the students who arrived late. Here we provide essential information. Only those students who arrived late missed at the beginning of the lesson. Not all of them. Okay? So we don't need essential information. We don't need commas here because this information is essential. Okay? Another example. summer, when most people travel, is my favorite season. What do you think? Do I need commas here? Thank you all. Is it all well? Thank you, Alice. We need commas, right? Because everyone knows about summer, right? When most people travel, it's extra information. When most people travel, it's extra information. Even without this information, the sentence still makes sense. We can say, summer is my favorite season. But of course, you can add more details. It's up to you. It's optional. Okay? Both of the sentences will be correct. It's just up to you. If you want to add more details, you can add this information. Okay? With commas. And say, summer, when most people travel, is my favorite season. Or summer is my favorite season. Another example. My best friend whose name is Alex lives in the UK. What do you think? Thank you, Alice. We still need commas, right? Because you could have more than one best friend, right? This information is still essential because you could have more than one best friend.